Hello there, this is going to be a quick video covering how to colour correct a sermon for our online Sunday services. The very first thing we want to do when approaching colour correcting the sermon is choosing the right point. As I skim through this, you can see that the brightness of the image and also slightly the colour temperature of the image changes as clouds pass overhead outside, changing the amount of natural light in the room. And so we want to make sure that we pick a point that is neither too dark, too bright, too warm, or too, what's the other one? Cool. And so we want to find a Goldilocks point in the image which is vaguely representative of most of the frame, sort of like the average frame. And so once we found a frame like this, we also want to make sure that it has all parts of the preacher's face visible, particularly the right hand part, and you'll see why later. But we want a good face on, face to camera shot, not too bright, not too dark, not too cool, not too warm. And after we've found that, we're going to come to our colour page. We're going to make sure that we have selected the correct clip. And then the first thing we want to do is brightness, contrast and saturation. So the first thing to do is just look at the image. Does it look too bright? Does it look too dark? That is our first port of call. But also we don't want to rely on the specific monitor that we're using, because every single monitor is different and will display colours, saturation and contrast in a slightly different way. But we want to come to our scopes, which can be accessed by pressing this, and go to our waveform. And we can see that most of the data in this image is skewed towards the bottom. This particular bit in the middle is Aaron, because this is left to right. So this is our radiator over here. And this is Aaron in the middle. And this is between Aaron and the radiator. And this is between Aaron and the edge of the shot on the right hand side. And so we could probably do with upping the brightness a little bit. And so we're going to change our gamma, which is roughly the sort of mids of the image. And we're going to push that up, which raises this stuff as well. And then we want to add a bit more contrast in. So because blacks are now grey, we want to make blacks black again and sort of try and spread out this darker part of the image. So we're going to come to curves. We're going to select custom, and we're just going to drag this until things are starting to touch the bottom of the image once more, or maybe just not touching the bottom of our scopes, sorry, over here. So now we can see the difference is just that it's slightly brighter and easier on the eyes too. If you want to increase the bright parts of the image, you can up the highlights here, but I like to leave those largely untouched. Now, let's just suppose that the image was really bright. So I'm just simulating that by making it bright artificially. We can come to our highlights and just decrease those until it's looking a little bit more respectable, I guess the word is. It will try its best to recover detail, but won't always be successful. And then we can also lower our shadows too, to bring down this part of the image. And again, before, after. But that does not apply to this, and so I will leave it as is and add a new node. And next, the thing we want to do is skin tones and also colour temperature. So to do the skin tones, we're going to select our qualifier, which is this menu item here. And we're going to zoom in and click on his face. We're going to make sure that this, I think it's highlight view. Yeah, highlight is enabled, so it greys out everything that's not selected. Now this is our qualifier selection right here in the middle, and we want to enlarge our selection so that it covers more of his face. And so we can do that by enlarging the width on the particular colour being selected and lowering the saturation, but not too much that it starts to get not skin into the image. And we can also lower the luminance, so darker parts of the image start to be included also. And then we just play around with this, trying to get more and more of particularly maybe this side of the face in the shot. And we've selected a few bits and pieces that aren't skin, but that's not the end of the world. As long as the majority of what we've selected is skin, that will be good enough. And so we're going to come to our vector scope, and we want to make sure that we've got show 2x zoom and show skin tone indicator enabled. Now, what we want to do is come to our curves, and we want to come to hue versus hue and just click on a bit of skin that's maybe on the left side of the face, and just drag it down and see that that now brings our cloud onto the line. What we want to do is bring this entire cloud as precisely along this line as possible, because that is the perfect skin tones line. And it doesn't actually matter the skin person of the colour you are, the skin colour of the person you are colour correcting, too many colours, that this skin tone line is for all colours of skin. At least that's what I'm told by professional colour people on YouTube. And so we're going to then just widen out our selection by just moving these dots left and right, and then just sort of refining our selection. So we don't want to overshoot the line, but we want to try and get everything perfectly on the line. Okie doke, and there we go. That is fairly perfectly on that line, as close as possible, with as little sort of range and variance as possible, which means that our skin tones are now the perfect colour, in theory at least. And so the key thing now is to come back to our qualifier and make sure we reset it. If we can see grey up here on this node or this node, that means that we have not reset our qualifier, and it is important that we do so. And so we'll reset that and have a look at how it looks. And we can see that there are some issues with certain skin tones basically now being purple, because they haven't been changed by our adjustments. And so we can see all this colour right here on the eye, under the nose, up here, that hasn't been changed. And so to adjust that, I'm just going to zoom in lots and click right here and adjust. And that has actually been solved by largely just widening out our colour selection. And there we go, we fine-tuned that to bring everything more back into line. And then the final thing just to do is general colour correction. Sorry, not general colour correction, general colour temperature. If the colour temperature is like obviously really bad, then I would recommend doing that before the skin tones. Whereas with the camera from the JC, the colour temperature is more or less accurate and the skin tones are just really terrible. And so what I'm going to do again is go back to our qualifier, select something white that's in the foreground. There's a slight colour temperature difference in the JC between the background, which is predominantly where like this massive white thing is positioned, and where like the grout and stuff is. So I'm going to use the grout as our white colour to colour correct, and we can see we're slightly too blue, and so I'm just going to push the colour temperature back, pull the tint down a bit, just to try and get our dot nicely in the middle, so that white is equally made up of all the colours. And there we go. Key thing to do is again reset our qualifier so that it is applied to the whole image. We can see from our vector scope that has actually pushed our skin tones slightly too green, and so we're going to come back to our skin tones tab. We're going to untick highlight so that we can now just see where that is, and we're just going to sort of push everything back up to try and just get it more along that line. So now we can see that when we get to the end, colours are roughly white, skin tones are looking good along this line, and now we just have to add a small amount of sharpening at the end. So I will add another node or use Control S, which is the keyboard shortcut. Now we'll come into blur, sharpen, and just take our radius down to 0.47. And that is the sermon perfectly colour corrected using scopes, so we're not dependent on the monitor.